Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Diana. This is my channel Bookish Di, and today I am finally wrapping up my May in reading. So numbers wise, May was about average for me. I read 7 books, although a lot of this was front loaded, so I ended up reading most of my books in the beginning and middle of the month, and then I didn't read anything for like the last week of May. I mean, I started things, but I didn't finish anything. Overall, I enjoyed most of what I read. There was one disappointment, which I will get into, but for the most part, I liked the books. I read a new to me author. I read a sequel. I started on a project, which will come out, the video will come out after this. So yeah, let's get into it. The first book I read in May was The Witch's Heart, written by Genevieve Gornichek, narrated by Jane Erstwessel. And this is a fantasy retelling of the frost giantess Angrboda, who is one of Loki's wives who gives birth to 3 of his monstrous children. And it's kind of a reimagining of who she is and how she met Loki and what her story is. So this was a quarterly pick for a Patreon that I'm in. It was for Thoughts on Tomes Patreon. And this sounded interesting, and the wait list for the audiobook wasn't super long, so I decided just to go for it and see how I'd like it, because I haven't read too many of the current crop of mythology retellings. Like, I haven't read Ariadne or Circe. I know Claire North has one coming out later this year called Ithaca, which is like the first in a trilogy of them. Like it's the popular thing to have right now, but I haven't really read any of them, so I figured this would be something different from like the normal Greek/Roman retellings. It was a mythology that I'm not super familiar with. And so for the most part, I enjoyed it. I liked the narration. I liked Angrboda and just how Gornichek wrote her and her relationships, not just with Loki, which I'll get into, but I think was my least favorite part. But also her relationships with another goddess, Skadi, as well as her children, and the larger Norse pantheon, because you find out that her relationship with Odin, like not a romantic relationship at all, but just her past with Odin and teaching him Skald, and I think that's what it was. And like teaching him the type of magic, that divination magic that she uses, and things like that. Yeah, so I did really enjoy those parts of it. I liked how weird it felt, which I think, especially for something like mythology, you do need. Like, there is supposed to be something otherworldly and unsettling about it. Like, I don't think, especially with something like Norse mythology, it should be like a one-for-one thing. So I liked those components. What I didn't particularly like was the relationship between Angrboda and Loki. Like, I very much felt like, girl, just dump him. Like, he's not worth it. Like, anyway. So that was really frustrating. And unfortunately, Angrboda's relationship with Loki plays a huge part, especially in the beginning and middle of the book. Less so, in the last third. Like, it's still there, but it's not like as ever present. And yeah, which it wasn't my favorite. So I ended up giving this like 3.75 out of 5 stars. I would say if you're looking for something a little bit different with your mythology retellings, this is a good way to go. I do recommend the audiobook. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that was a good start to the month. Unfortunately, I could not say the same for my second book that I read in May, which was Foul, The Secret World of FIFA Bribes, Vote Rigging, and Ticket Scandals by Andrew Jennings. So I'm sure I've mentioned this many times before, but I do like soccer. I also like, in terms of my true crime, more of like the corruption, white collar true crime, and that kind of coincided with the FIFA's everything. So this was so I had become aware of Andrew Jennings back in 2015 when the U.S. Department of Justice coordinated the arrest of several high-profile FIFA executives for so many things, so many corruption charges. And this was around the time that Sepp Blatter had just won re-election despite being the most corrupt motherfucker. And then you also were having the Women's World Cup being played up in Canada, and you were having discussions around the fact that the women were playing on turf instead of grass, which would never fly with the men. And we're going to be seeing that soon enough, because by the time I post this video, the venues for the 2026 World Cup will be announced, including at least 2 in Canada, in places where the women had to play on turf. But surprise, the men don't have to do that. Anyway, I'm not still bitter at all. For those who don't know, playing on turf is really hard on the athletes and like can cause some pretty bad injuries, and it just plays. Anyway, people don't like playing on turf for reasons. Anyway, so I'd become aware because he was cited as someone who was an expert in FIFA corruption because he had been reporting on it really early on, and he had been working as a sports investigative reporter investigating the International Olympic Committee way back when, and then he shifted his focus to FIFA, and this was his first book kind of documenting what he found in the different corruption aspects. And so I've been trying to track this book down for a while. This was something where I'm like, oh, this aligns with my interests. I'm really interested to see like what this kind of first book in the genre essentially put out. And I finally got a hold of it through interlibrary loan at work. And this was a disappointment. Not gonna lie, this I think is probably the most disappointing book that I've read so far this year for a number of reasons. So I do want to just get off right up back. I do respect Jennings and the work that he put in to expose this, because I think especially with some of the corruption stuff, it was kind of a well-known secret, but it wasn't always talked about. And so he was one of the first people, like major sports writers, who was really shining a light on this. However, I found this book to be really poorly organized. There were weird asides, and Jennings inserted himself as a character like at odd points. Yeah, and really the organization writing kind of brought me out of this book because it was just very disjointed. There was no real cohesive narrative. It felt at times like a series of vignettes, and I was joking with people both when I was reading it and after I finished it that you could really tell that Jennings used to write for the Daily Mail derogatory. It wasn't well edited, in my opinion. Like, I think it definitely needed to have a more cohesive narrative structure, which is what I've seen in other books that I've read beforehand about FIFA and corruption, is that there is kind of like a narrative through line, and that wasn't happening in this book. I think the other reason this is disappointing for me was, and I think this has less to do with like the content of the book, but more about the fact that this book was published in 2007. It's 15 years old, and there's a lot of things, like a lot of things have happened since then. Like, you've had, you know, the whole Qatar 2022 scandal, you've had, you know, Sepp Blatter leaving, you've had Infantino doing more of the same that was happening under Blatter. Like, there's just so much shit that's happened where this felt like an artifact of its time. I think that's the best way to put it. So am I glad I finally read this book? I'm not sure yet. But and I don't want to dock older nonfiction books, because I do think they can be good. Like, for example, In the Band Played On is a phenomenal piece of nonfiction. It's honestly one of my favorite nonfiction books that I've ever read, and that book was written in the 1980s. Like, that is a book that, you know, is of its time, but I think it also was just phenomenally well written and well reported, and Randy, you could tell that this was something that meant a lot to the author. And I don't know, this was just not a good book. So I gave this like 2.5 out of 5 stars. I'm sad that, you know, I finally found this damn book and I didn't like it. Following that disappointment, I read a book that I did enjoy, and that was The Devil That You Know by Kit Rocha. This is the second book in their Mercenary Librarian series, and it follows Maya, who is a former data courier for the tech corporations, where she's been notified where she can remember pretty much anything she hears and keep it in her mind. And Gray, who is the sniper for the runaway group, the Silver Devils, who met in the first book, and now they're working together. And the plot for this book kicks off where the librarians, so Nina, who is the female romantic lead in book 1, Maya and Danny, and then the Silver Devils get news of some genetically modified kids, and they're trying to free them and then track down, you know, what's the source of these kids so they can put a stop to it. So yeah. And then Gray is dealing with some implant problems. So the implant that he and the Silver Devils have, as being like former soldiers for the Tech Corps, his body's rejecting the implant. And so he's like, well, I'm gonna die, so I might as well just, you know, help Maya out with whatever she wants. And Maya is like, no, well, I wanna help solve the issue with this kids and, you know, maybe take down a corrupt oligarchy while I'm at it. So I really enjoyed this. Not quite as much as book 1, but I really like how Brie and Donna, who are the authors behind Kit Rocha, write relationships, not just with the romantic leads. So like the romance between Gray and Maya is really important, but what I also really appreciate with these books is the fact that the relationships with the non-romantic partners is just as important. So you see, you know, Maya's relationship with Nina and Danny and her community and the kid that they rescue, and a spoiler character who I can't really get into, but who's basically like a feral cat who's like trying to decide if she wants to stay. And then you also have, you know, Gray's relationships with not just the Silver Devils, but with Nina and Danny as well. And so I really appreciate the fact that this book highlights the like platonic relationships as being really important and really vital. I also like the care that that is given to, like, you know, you do have combat, you have, you know, gunfights and knives and whatever, but you also have thinking about like, okay, so what would a dystopia look like in terms of how people are caring for each other? So that's one of the things that Maya, Nina, and Danny do, is they run this library that, you know, digitizes old books or that loans out equipment and helps their community. And I really appreciate that, the fact that it's like this kind of hopeful dystopia. I think I do wish there had been a little bit more. This book is under 300 pages, and I would have liked it to be a little longer, but also this was written during 2020, so extending grace on that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a fun book. I already have book 3 pre-ordered. I can't wait to read it. I think I give this 4.25 out of 5 stars, but love this series. I really hope that they're able to sell more to Tor once book 3 is out in August, because there are some characters who could potentially be romantic leads in their own book, and I'm very excited to see what happens with that. So yeah, if you're looking for fun science fiction romance, I really recommend these books. I do want to read some of their older books at some point, but I don't know when that's going to happen. The last 4 books that I read in May, I'm not going to talk super long about because it's going to be part of a reading vlog that's going to be going up after this. But just a heads up, they are all Star Wars because I was going to Star Wars Celebration and I needed to get in the mood. And then I also needed to get in the mood for the premiere of ObiWan, which I'm enjoying a lot. I love it. I'm like... Episode 5 is tomorrow, and I don't know what's gonna happen. And it's like, I know Obi-Wan and Leia are gonna be okay because like they show up in episode 4, but it's like the journey to get there was stressing me the fuck out. Anyway, on to the books. So 2 of these are rereads, 2 of these are new. So the first reread was Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. I believe I first read this in 2019 or 2020, I can't remember, but this is set when Obi-Wan is Qui-Gon's apprentice, and they are not working out so well together, and they're trying to figure out, do they stay together? Do they dissolve this partnership? And the decision kind of gets accelerated because Qui-Gon is offered a spot on the council, but before he accepts, he and Obi-Wan go on a mission to help Count Dooku's first apprentice, Rael, deal with kind of a sticky situation on the planet that he is currently on, and shenanigans ensue. And yeah, it was fun. I really like it. I like Claudia Gray's Star Wars writing. I love baby Obi-Wan. He is a very anxious mess, and I relate to that. And there's going to be another Obi-Wan book coming out in July, I believe, written by Kirsten White, and it's also dealing with Obi-Wan as a Padawan. So I am looking forward to that and seeing how this fits in with this. And this got either 4.25 or 4.5 stars. I really love this book. The second reread was Star Wars Queen's Peril by E.K. Johnston. This is the second book published, but first chronologically in her Padme trilogy. So this covers Padme from when she's first elected as queen through the invasion of Naboo, and it deals with her and her relationships with her handmaidens, particularly Sabe, who is her primary body double. And I read this last year. I loved it. I think, or maybe it was 2020. I can't remember. Time's lost all meaning in this pandemic. But I remember when I first read this, I said this was fanfic positive or fanfic affectionate, or anyway, I agree with that. I still really love this book. I like how Johnston writes the relationships between the five girls and how they're all different but come together for this common purpose. I really like how she talks about the invasion of Naboo, which, for being such a pivotal point in the Star Wars universe, isn't something that we've really seen. And so we do get a glimpse of that here. The other thing I do appreciate is Susan Collins is XP'd as a prison guard, because fuck Susan Collins. So again, I think I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I can't remember. Love this book. Really recommend it, especially if you are a fellow prequels child like I am. Next was the first of the 2 new Star Wars books for May, and that was Star Wars Queen's Shadow, also by E.K. Johnston. This is the first published in the Padme trilogy, but takes place after Queen's Peril. And you can definitely tell that this was written first because some of the stylistic things that Johnston does in both Queen's Peril and the next book I'm going to be talking about don't really occur here. This one has more like a straight linear narrative this one is more tightly focused on Padme and Sabe. So this book covers Padme's transition from queen to senator and her trying to figure out, what am I doing now? Because her initial plan hadn't been to be a senator, but she was asked to do it. And so it deals with her transition. It also brings in Sabe as kind of this agent trying to help out Padme because she had wanted to do more on slave liberation after her experiences on Tatooine in the first movie. And so you also get some backstory with Rush Clovis, who's a character we meet in Star Wars The Clone Wars. So yeah, I did enjoy this, not quite as much. So I think this was 4.25 out of 5 stars. Again, I do have a whole reading vlog that will be coming up soon where I talk about my experiences with these. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad I finally got around to reading this book. And then the final book I read in May is the final book in the Padme trilogy, and that is Queen's Hope, also written by E.K. Johnston. And this covers the aftermath, like the period right after Attack of the Clones. And so this is kind of a strange book I want to say I did enjoy this book, but it's a little strange because with the previous 2 Padme books, Padme is very much a teenager, whereas in this book, she's now in her mid-20s. She's 24. And so it's very interesting to me that this is still a YA book. And I get that Johnston's a YA writer, but I think it also could have been interesting as an adult book, especially since we do have the adult book with Star Wars Brotherhood, which kind of gets into books. Anyway, I have some more thoughts. I don't know when they'll come out anyway, but I really enjoyed this book. Although again, I do wish it had been longer. E.K. Johnston tends to write shorter books, and so this one is under 300 pages. Again, I would have liked it a little longer. But like I said, it's dealing with Padme after Attack of the Clones, and it's also dealing with kind of the devolution of Padme and Sabe's relationship, because especially Padme is going on a different path that Sabe can't follow her, and it has like this very kind of devastating friendship breakup scene. And you'll see this in the vlog, but I literally had to lie down for a bit, like on the ground, and process my emotions after finishing this because of how this book ends, but also knowing what happens with Sabe in the Darth Vader comics that are currently coming out, written by Greg Pak. And yeah, so this one got a 4.25 out of 5 star. I am sad that the Padme trilogy is over, but I do know that E.K. Johnston is working on a new Star Wars book that she can't say anything about, but during the Lucasfilm Publishing panel at Celebration, when the panel was asked who is currently writing a top secret Star Wars book, she raised her hand. So I'm very intrigued what she's up to next. So that was my main books. A lot of Star Wars. Mostly good, one major stinker, but I did enjoy what I read for the most part. So yeah, do any of these books sound interesting? Do you also have an overwhelming amount of feelings about the tragedy that is the Star Wars prequels? Please let me know in the comments below, and thank you all so much for watching. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe, and I will talk with you later. Bye.